How's it going, folks? CR here, and by now I'm sure we're all aware of what happened on June 29th in Portland. And I don't think there's really anything I can say on the incident that hasn't already been said. And while I'd love to respond to those Antifa types and the people that defend them and their violent actions, well, first off, they're probably not going to see this anyway. Second, even if they did, what I say is going to go in one and out the other. I'm pretty much spinning my wheels trying to address some on this one, so I'm not even going to waste my breath. However, I do think I have a pretty reasonable subscriber base, so I wanted to put out some predictions on what I think is going to happen going forward and some tips for everybody here. Alright, so going forward, there are, I think, at least 3 planned rallies in Portland in July and August denouncing the incident that happened the 29th. So we'll have to see how those go. The police have already put out anybody who goes to those incidences or those rallies in riot gear will be charged with inciting a riot. Now, whether or not they're actually going to keep good to that, or if it's just a half-hearted response, or if they only plan to enforce that on the right while letting the Antifa people get away with it again, we'll see in the future. However, I think Ted Wheeler at this point realizes he's in a lot of hot water over this. He is in the spotlight, so I think if he's exercising his better judgment, the police will enforce that, and they will enforce proper crowd control. I could be wrong on this one, but I think he understands that people are pissed at him. We actually have Senator Cruz, who is calling for his investigation right now, as he should be. You have Andy No's lawyer, who has a fund set up to sue the city of Portland over this, and I hope she actually is successful on this one, just the same as I hope Ted Cruz is successful in getting this investigation launched, because this has been an ongoing thing with Portland, and I think it's time that somebody rein the authorities in, because their authorities, from what it looks like, are derelict in their duties. So with this being said, I do think that things are going to quiet down there for a little bit, to say the least. I don't think it's going to be permanent by any means, but I do think it's going to get quiet. Historically speaking, over the last few years, we have seen escalations followed by de-escalations, and it doesn't look like any of this is stopping so far. And where this goes, really anybody's guess. I mean, there are quite a few possibilities that come of this, quite a few possible consequences. I know Tim Pool pointed out that could this be the start of another civil war, or could another civil war eventually get triggered over this? I guess it is one possibility. Another such possibility, could there be a massive government crackdown on this, and if so, how far does it go? I mean, do we just crack down on protests, charge a large fee, for anybody who wants to hold a rally, for security costs, for the police to be there? Does it end up with the police getting a lot more aggressive in dealing with rioters? Does it go even further than that? Could it possibly be a catalyst for the government coming in and taking more power and restricting more of our liberties, because people get tired of seeing the riots and stuff like that, and they just want their neighborhoods to go back to being somewhat normal. And you have some politicians saying, well, we really need more of your liberties, more power to enforce order. I think that's definitely very possible. Then again, who knows? Maybe at one point these people who are doing this stuff, that are going out and causing this violence, will eventually grow up and decide, well, what have I been doing with my life? I mean, I'm not going to be too optimistic on that. I'm not going to hold my breath on that, but that is also a possibility. The question is, where does it go from here? And I think that should be a question on anybody's minds who's paying attention. I know a large portion of the country is not paying attention to this. In fact, probably doesn't even care. I would venture out to say probably at least 2/3 of the country does not care about what's going on here, or this civil unrest. And if this escalates to a point to where it involves more people's lives, well, they are going to be the ones that are probably going to be the most shocked by it. So, what do we need to do? Well, one of the things we should be doing, if we're not doing this already on the social, political, and cultural level, is staking up for the Bill of Rights. To some, these things may seem archaic. I assured you that they're not. They're still as relevant today as they were when they were written. And even though people today may not see a use for some of them, the need is there. The Bill of Rights were intended as another safeguard against tyranny. And that's just plain and simple. One of the other things we need to be doing is paying attention to our surroundings. We don't need to be off in La La Land while we're out in public or anything like that. And this really applies to more than just whether or not Antifa's around, or whether or not, the common criminals around, or anything like that. This goes for everyday hazards too. I mean, things such as looking both ways before you cross the road. Things of that nature, And I can't believe that this actually has to be said, but I do think that probably most of the people who are already watching my videos probably already know this. My next bit of advice is going to come as controversial to some, and it really shouldn't be all that controversial of an idea. It's not one to me, and it's not one to a lot of the people I know. However, it is controversial to some. And our current state of politics, believe it or not, we could set that aside on this one too. And this is the prospect of being armed. And I understand it's a foreign concept to some, and it really shouldn't be. We have fire plans, even though, well, we should anyway, even though, you might never ever have a fire in your home. If you come from where I come from, you have a tornado plan, even though you may or may not ever be in a tornado or ever have to use that plan. And the same is true for being armed. Now, I also understand that there are certain circumstances. Maybe somebody lives in a state where it's much harder to be legally armed, if not impossible. I understand there are certain places that you're not allowed to be armed. And I also understand that there are some people who are not legally allowed to possess a firearm. I know some myself. And I also understand that there are people who have decided themselves that a firearm would be more of a liability to them than an asset. And I'm not going to force them or push them to be armed. I think they know themselves better than I know them. So I am understanding about these extenuating circumstances. However, I am talking about the average person. And I do think that the average person should consider having a self-defense plan, and I do think they should at least consider having incorporating a firearm or two into that plan. And here's my advice for the average person that has not done this yet. The very first thing they need to do is get an understanding of their state and federal laws when it comes to firearm ownership, the requirements that it takes to own a firearm in their local area, the firearms that are legal and versus the ones that are illegal in their local area, their use of deadly force laws, or their self-defense laws, and all that. Then you're going to break it into two categories here on what I think you should do after that. The first category, I'm going to deal with the 18 but not 21-year-olds yet. And for them, I think their first firearm, obviously because you cannot purchase a handgun until you're 21, should be a good general purpose rifle. Again, check the laws in your state. Obviously, my recommendation will be your standard AR-15 carbine, 16-inch barrel chambered in 5.56. With that AR-15, I would suggest a good 3-point sling. I would suggest, because I understand that there are AR-15s that do not come with any sights on them, iron sights or optics, but they come ready to mount optics. You want to make sure you have iron sights, and if you want to have a CCO, I actually highly recommend that too, but you do still want to have the iron sights on it if it's a personal defense rifle. You want to have some spare magazines. I would suggest 15 of the 30-round magazines. I know it sounds a bit excessive, but depending on which quality of magazines you buy, you're going to find out real quick that not all of those magazines are probably going to be reliable, and you buy several extras just in case when you take it to the range you find out some magazines aren't reliable. You can set those to the side. And alright, so do that. You get training, you learn how to use that rifle. Again, you learn your state and federal laws. I mean, and training is a big thing on it. I mean, and that's something you voluntarily do. I understand this is not going to make you a soldier by any means, but it does help out when it comes to if you're in a situation where you actually have to protect your life. And once you turn 21, what you should be getting is a good pistol that you can conceal carry. I recommend something in the major calibers, or in the popular 3 calibers, as I call them, 9mm, 45, or 40. I personally prefer 9mm because you can generally get a good compact 9mm that's decent for personal protection and works as a good concealed carry gun too. Next thing you need to do is get your concealed carry license, and you need to train. So Now, if you're 21, I mean, obviously the pistol and the concealed carry license is probably going to be number one. Because let's face facts, you're not going to be carrying that rifle with you everywhere you go. In fact, the pistol is much more convenient and much more concealable. So that is actually my personal advice on that one. Now I know I can go in a lot more depth with this, but I'm not, because this is not a video to go and teach first-time firearm owners about what firearms they should pick out first. That might be the topic of a different video. So my next bit of advice on this is going to be a legal defense plan. Now, may I have Texas Law Shield, and about like $15 a month. I don't even remember the exact cost. It's not expensive, but it's always good to have, because in any incident where you have to use your firearm to protect yourself, there's a good chance that you run the risk of prosecution. And like Texas Law Shield, because they give you a card, it comes with it, has a business line number on it you call during business line, but they have a 24-hour hotline, so if you actually do have to use your weapon in personal defense, you give the police a call, and then after you get off the phone with a 911 operator, you call the emergency hotline, and they'll have an attorney waiting on 24 hours. So I think it's a really good plan to have, but if you do have a firearm that you have for personal protection, it is a good idea to have that legal defense plan. Oh, so with that being said, I'm sure that there are probably other things I'd like to say on the topic that are just not coming to mind right now. But, hey, if y'all been listening this long, thanks for listening. Y'all take her easy out there and have a great day.